Commander Alex Carter pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the abandoned outpost, his pulse hammering in his ears. The entire sky above Vega 4 was on fire. Streaks of plasma rained down from Zivar warships, their orbital bombardment tearing the ground apart. Smoke and ash turned the once thriving colony into a graveyard. His visor flickered with red alerts. 6 minutes until total planetary destruction. Commander Carter, all evac teams are aboard. You've got 90 seconds to get your ass on that ship. The voice of Captain Rice crackled through his earpiece. The urgency was clear. Alex exhaled sharply. He had done his job, secured the last human survivors, fought off Zivar patrols, and ensured his men made it back. He was supposed to be on that ship, but then he heard the distress signal. A faint, desperate transmission. An unknown Zivar frequency. He shouldn't have been able to pick it up. Zivar comms were encrypted. But something had gone wrong, and now their last message was playing on his helmet's display. Please, help, my child. We are trapped. Anyone, please. Alex hesitated. The signal was weak, the voice trembling. Zivar weren't supposed to beg. They were ruthless warriors, technologically superior to humans in every way. They had crushed 3 human colonies in the past year alone. And yet, here was one of them, pleading for help. His training screamed at him to ignore it. His mission was over. The planet was lost. If he didn't leave now, he would die along with it. Commander, move your ass now. Reyes barked again. Alex clenched his jaw. He was about to switch off his comm when another sound crackled through the static, a child's cry. Something inside him twisted. He looked at the evacuation ship in the distance, its thrusters glowing as it prepared for takeoff. The final escape route. He looked at the coordinates of the distress signal, blinking on his HUD. It wasn't far. Maybe 2 minutes at full sprint. 2 minutes to reach them. 1 minute to decide. 3 minutes to escape. He cursed under his breath and ran. The ground shook beneath his feet as another orbital strike hit the colony's central district. Flames erupted, sending debris flying. Alex leaped over a collapsed walkway, his boots skidding on scorched metal. His armor servos strained to keep up with his desperate speed. The signal led him to a shattered building. Its roof caved in from an earlier blast. Smoke and dust made it hard to see, but his helmet's thermal scanner picked up 3 life signatures inside. Zivar heat signatures. Weapon raised, he stepped forward. A figure moved in the shadows. Alex's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the figure stumbled into the dim light. It wasn't a soldier. A Zivar male, badly wounded, his dark blue exoskeletal armor cracked and stained with his own violet blood. His reptilian face contorted in pain, one of his 4 arms hanging limp. Behind him, a Zivar woman clutched a small child, shielding him with her body. They weren't warriors. They were civilians. The Zivar male tensed at the sight of Alex's weapon. His remaining good arm reached for something. A knife, maybe. A last act of defiance. But then, the woman spoke in broken English. Help, please. Alex hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all the time the male needed to act. Not to attack, but to fall to his knees, his body giving out. He was too weak to fight. Alex knew he was making a mistake before he even made it. He holstered his rifle and moved forward. We need to move. Now. His voice was clipped, urgent. The Zivar woman looked at him in disbelief. The child whimpered but clung to his mother. The male tried to stand. Failed. Alex growled in frustration and grabbed him, slinging one of his arms over his shoulder. The Zivar stiffened but didn't resist. He was too weak to protest. The ground trembled violently. Another impact. Alex's HUD flashed red. 3 minutes until final bombardment. Move, he barked, pulling them forward. The woman followed, holding her child tightly. They barely made it 10 steps before a Zivar patrol dropped from the sky. 3 armored soldiers landed in front of them. their weapons humming with lethal energy. Their crimson visors locked onto the fleeing civilians, then onto Alex. Traitors. The lead soldier raised his rifle. No words. No mercy. Zivar didn't tolerate weakness, and aiding the human was the ultimate betrayal. Alex moved before he thought. He shoved the injured Zivar down and opened fire. His first shot slammed into the nearest soldier's helmet, sending him sprawling. The second warrior lunged forward, a plasma blade flashing in the smoke-filled air. Alex barely dodged in time, the blade scorching his shoulder plate. The Zivar woman screamed. The child clung to her. Alex gritted his teeth and fired point-blank. One shot through the second soldier's chest, another through his skull. The last enemy lunged. Alex met him mid-charge, their bodies colliding in a brutal struggle. The Zivar was stronger, forcing Alex back, clawed hands grasping for his throat. Alex activated his wrist blade. The Zivar choked, then collapsed as the blade punched through his chest. Alex shoved the corpse aside, panting. 2 minutes left. He turned back to the family. The Zivar woman looked at him, wide-eyed. Run. They ran. The evacuation ship was already lifting off. Reyes, hold that damn door. Alex roared into his comm. Silence. Then, Reyes's voice, cold and final. You're on your own, Carter. The ship's thrusters roared as it ascended, the last human transport leaving Vega 4. Alex skidded to a stop, his heart hammering. They left him. They left him to die. He turned to the Zivar woman. She clutched her child tightly, staring at him in confusion, fear, and something else. Hope. Alex exhaled. 1 minute left. The sky turned white. The final wave of orbital strikes was coming. There was no time. No time to escape the surface. But maybe there was still a way. His HUD flickered. A single remaining option. A half-destroyed military outpost 1 kilometer east. A stealth dropship, the only way off this planet. Alex clenched his fists. One chance. He turned to the Zivar family, his decision already made. Follow me if you want to live. And he ran toward the only hope they had left. Alex Carter ran through the ruins of Vega 4, his breath sharp and controlled, his heart pounding against his ribs. The Zivar mother and child followed closely, their movements quick but uncertain. The injured Zivar male limped beside him, half-dragged by Alex's grip. Every step felt like running on a dying planet's heartbeat, the ground trembling as another wave of bombardment shattered the distant cityscape. The sky overhead was a swirling storm of destruction, Zivar warships locking onto their final targets, wiping out anything left behind. Alex's HUD flickered with warnings. 70 seconds until the next orbital strike. No time to hesitate. The outpost was just ahead. It had been abandoned hours ago, left to burn like the rest of Vega 4. But Alex remembered its layout. There had been a stealth dropship stationed there, a prototype built for silent infiltration. If it was still intact, it was their only chance to get off this rock. They reached the entrance, a massive metal door barely hanging onto its frame. Alex let go of the injured Zivar and slammed his fist against the control panel. The screen flickered red. No power. He gritted his teeth, turned to the Zivar woman. Can you open this? She hesitated, then pressed her palm against the panel. Her fingers trembled. Her armor's interface connected to the old Zivar tech, embedded in the system. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a spark of life. The door groaned and slid open just enough for them to squeeze through. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning metal. Red emergency lights flickered along the walls, casting eerie shadows. The dropship was ahead, resting on a platform, its matte black surface almost blending into the dark. Alex moved fast, guiding the Zivar family inside. The ship's interior was cramped but functional. He strapped the injured male into a seat, then turned to the mother and child. The kid, barely old enough to understand the chaos around him, clung to his mother, his wide, glowing eyes staring up at Alex. The woman met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Trust. He turned to the cockpit and powered up the ship. The controls were complex, a mix of human and Zivar engineering. The system sputtered to life, but the console flashed red. Fuel reserves low. Damn it. They had one jump, one shot at escaping before the engines died. His comm crackled. A new transmission. Not from his ship. From the human fleet. Commander Carter. The voice of Captain Rice came through, calm but sharp. Stand down. You are harboring enemy combatants. Turn them over, and we will retrieve you. Alex's hands gripped the controls. His mind raced. This was wrong. They weren't combatants. They were civilians. This isn't a request, Carter. Rice continued. You have 1 minute. After that, you'll be marked as a traitor. A traitor. Alex felt his stomach tighten. He had fought alongside these men. He had saved their lives. And now, because he refused to leave an innocent family behind, they were ready to turn on him. The Zivar mother watched him, her expression unreadable. The child's small fingers tightened around his mother's arm, sensing the tension. Alex's thoughts spiraled. If he turned them in, the Zivar family would be executed. If he refused, the human fleet would see him as a threat. His fingers hovered over the comm switch. Then, a new sound. A deep rhythmic hum. Alex's blood ran cold. A Zivar hunter patrol. The ship's sensors flashed a warning. 3 Zivar interceptor craft had locked onto them. The Zivar weren't coming to rescue their own. They were coming to eliminate loose ends. The comm crackled again. This time, Reyes's voice was sharp. Carter, respond. What's your status? Alex cursed under his breath. No time. His hand slammed the controls forward. The ship lurched, engines roaring to life. The Zivar woman gasped, grabbing her child as the sudden movement threw them back into their seats. A missile alert blared through the cockpit. The Zivar hunters had fired. Alex twisted the ship sideways, the missile barely missing, exploding against the outpost behind them. No shields, no countermeasures. If they took a direct hit, they were dead. The human fleet wasn't helping. They weren't firing on the Zivar ships. They were just watching, waiting. Another transmission came through. Rise again. This time, his tone was different. Colder. Carter, if you don't surrender in the next 10 seconds, we will open fire. Alex's breath hitched. His own people. He had fought for them, bled for them. And now, they were willing to kill him. He looked at the Zivar family, at the father, barely conscious, at the mother, who had trusted him, at the child, too young to understand why the world wanted him dead. He made his choice. Alex killed the comm. No more talking. Just survival. He yanked the ship into a sharp dive, racing toward the edge of Vega 4's atmosphere. The Zivar hunters pursued, their plasma rounds scorching the ship's hull. Alex's hands moved on instinct, weaving through debris, dodging fire. The human fleet was in range now. If they fired, it was over. And then, the impossible happened. The Zivar interceptors locked onto the human fleet. They weren't after Alex anymore. They were after the ones who abandoned their own. The first human battleship erupted in flames as Zivar missiles tore through its hull. Chaos unfolded as human and Zivar forces clashed in open space. Alex sought his window. He punched the hyperdrive. The ship trembled. The Zivar mother gasped. The injured father groaned. The child clutched his mother tighter. The stars stretched, twisted. And then, silence. They were gone. Alex exhaled, his hand still gripping the controls. His chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven breaths. They had made it. They had escaped. He turned in his seat. The Zivar woman stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, she bowed her head. A silent thanks. Alex nodded back. The human fleet had betrayed him. His own people had left him for dead. But he had saved a family that wasn't his own. And for the first time in a long time, Alex Carter didn't feel like just a soldier. He felt human. Alex Carter's hands gripped the ship's controls as they tore through the darkness of space. The hyperdrive jump had saved them from Vega 4's destruction, but they weren't safe yet. The ship's warning alarms blared, flashing red across the cockpit. Something was wrong. The Zyvar mother clutched her child tightly in the seat behind him. The injured father groaned, his breathing shallow. The small escape craft was barely holding together after the rough jump. Alex's HUD flickered with alerts. Hull integrity at 42%, fuel reserves critical, and his blood ran cold. Enemy ships detected. A squadron of Zyvar interceptors had followed them through hyperspace. 6 enemy fighters, fast, agile, and fully armed. They weren't letting him go. Alex cursed under his breath and pushed the throttle forward. The stolen dropship wasn't built for dogfights. It was a stealth vessel, meant for infiltration and extraction, not direct combat. Its only advantage was speed, and even that wasn't much against Zyvar hunters. The comm crackled to life, and a deep, guttural voice spoke in the Zyvar tongue. The mother stiffened behind him. Alex didn't need a translator to understand the message. They wanted the fugitives. He glanced at the Zyvar woman through the cockpit's reflection. She met his gaze, fear in her eyes, but also determination. She knew what would happen if they were caught. Alex clenched his jaw. Not an option. He flipped a switch, cutting the comm channel. No surrender. The Zyvar ships opened fire. Alex jerked the controls, sending the dropship into a steep dive. Plasma rounds streaked past, barely missing the hull. The ship shuddered under the shockwaves. "Hold on," he shouted. The Zyvar woman clutched her child, shielding him as best as she could. The injured father groaned in pain, but there was no time to check on him. Alex twisted the ship sideways, threading through a debris field left from an old battle. Broken ships floated like dead giants, their shattered hulls drifting aimlessly in the void. If he could use the wreckage as cover, he might have a chance. The Zyvar fighters weren't hesitating. They maneuvered through the debris with deadly precision, closing the distance. One ship fired a missile. Alex reacted instantly. He rolled the ship, dodging between 2 massive chunks of wreckage. The missile barely missed, exploding behind them. The shockwave sent them spinning. Alex fought the controls, gritting his teeth as he stabilized the ship. Too close. Another alert blared. One of the fighters had locked onto them. Alex's fingers flew over the controls. The dropship had no weapons, but it still had its stealth systems. Maybe he could use that. He slammed the cloaking switch. For a moment, the ship flickered and vanished from enemy sensors. The Zyvar fighters hesitated, scanning for them. Alex held his breath. The Zyvar woman stared at him, her hands gripping her seat. The child whimpered, sensing the tension. Then, a warning flashed. Stealth systems failing. Alex's heart sank. The Zyvar's advanced scanners had picked up the ship's faint energy signature. They were already adjusting. He had seconds before they locked on again. He pushed the engines to their limit, darting toward the densest part of the wreckage. The dropship weaved between twisted metal, scraping past broken hulls. If he could just lose them. A Zyvar fighter swooped down, cutting him off. Another moved to flank him. They were boxing him in. Alex growled. No way in hell. He yanked the controls, forcing the ship into a sharp upward climb. The Zyvar fighters chased, matching his every move. They were faster. They were deadlier. But Alex had something they didn't. Desperation. His eyes darted across the debris field. Then, an idea. He spotted a massive derelict battleship, half buried in floating wreckage. Its reactor core, long dead, still had trace energy readings. Alex grinned. He pushed the ship forward, heading straight for the wreck. The Zyvar fighters followed, closing in. Then, at the last second, Alex cut the engines. The ship went dead silent, coasting forward like another piece of drifting debris. The Ziver fighters zoomed past. For a moment, they lost him. Then, Alex fired the thrusters. The sudden burst of energy sent the ship into a spiraling dive, straight through a narrow opening in the wrecked battleship. The Ziver fighters realized their mistake too late. One of them slammed into debris, exploding in a fireball. The others adjusted, but Alex was already ahead. He twisted the ship through the wreckage, narrowly avoiding twisted metal and broken beams. 2 fighters broke off, unable to follow. 3 remained. Alex knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. Then, another warning. One of the Zivar ships was charging its main cannon. Alex's mind raced. No weapons, no shields, no escape. Unless... His eyes locked onto a massive hunk of wreckage floating above them. If he timed it right. The Ziver fighter fired. Alex jerked the controls at the last possible second. The plasma blast missed him by inches, but slammed directly into the floating wreckage above. The metal collapsed. A massive chunk of debris crashed down, smashing into the pursuing Zivar fighters. 2 ships were crushed instantly. Only one remained. Alex gunned the engines, rocketing out of the wreckage. The last Zivar ship followed. His fuel was nearly gone. The ship was barely holding together. One last move. Alex twisted the ship toward a small asteroid field. If he couldn't outrun them, he'd outmaneuver them. The Zivar fighter followed, its pilot confident. Alex dove through the asteroids at breakneck speed. Rocks tumbled around him, spinning dangerously close. One wrong move, and he'd be space dust. But Alex knew exactly what he was doing. The Zivar didn't. The enemy fighter clipped an asteroid. Just a graze, but enough. It spun out of control, crashing into another rock and erupting into flames. Alex exhaled, chest heaving. Silence. The ship floated through the asteroid field, battered, broken, but alive. The Zivar mother looked at him, shock and relief on her face. The child, for the first time, smiled. Alex smirked, slumping back in his seat. Now that, he muttered, was a hell of a flight. But as he stared at the empty void ahead, he knew one thing. This wasn't over. The ship drifted in the cold void, barely holding together. Alex Carter's hands trembled as he worked the failing controls. The last battle had left them battered, their fuel nearly gone, their stealth systems damaged. They were running on borrowed time. The Zivar mother sat silently behind him, her child curled up against her. The injured father barely moved, his breath shallow. Alex could see the exhaustion in their eyes, the unspoken fear. They weren't safe yet. His HUD flickered with new alerts. Incoming scan detected. Alex's heart pounded. Eye hunters, the cold, calculating machines designed to exterminate anything that wasn't part of their network. They had no emotions, no mercy. Just one directive: eliminate all threats. And right now, that meant him. He cursed under his breath and shut down all non-essential systems. If the AI ships detected even a whisper of energy, they'd be on him in seconds. The ship powered down, plunging them into darkness. Only the soft glow of emergency lights remained. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a shadow moved outside the window. Alex's breath caught. A massive AI warship, sleek and black, glided past them. Its surface was covered in shifting, living metal, its scanning lights sweeping across the void like searching eyes. It was beautiful in the most terrifying way. A machine that had perfected the art of hunting. And it wasn't alone. Smaller AI drones flitted through space, scanning the wreckage. They were looking for survivors, looking for him. Alex clenched his fists. One wrong move and they were dead. The child whimpered softly. Alex's stomach twisted. He turned, pressing a finger to his lips. The Zivar mother held the child close, whispering something in her own language. Outside, the AI warship stopped moving. A red light flickered along its hull. It had detected something. Alex barely breathed. His muscles ached from the tension, but he forced himself to stay still. Seconds passed. Then, a mechanical screech echoed through the ship. Alex's heart froze. They knew. The AI drones shifted direction, coming straight for them. Alex slammed the emergency restart. The ship roared to life. "Hold on," he shouted. The Zyvar woman grabbed the child as the ship lurched forward, engines sputtering but pushing them into motion. The AI warship immediately reacted, its sleek form twisting, its weapon systems locking onto them. A warning blared. Missile incoming. Alex yanked the controls, throwing the ship into a sharp dive. The missile streaked past, barely missing them. But the AI wasn't done. The hunters were relentless. A second missile locked on. Alex's hands flew across the console. No countermeasures. No defenses. Just raw instinct. He spotted a dense asteroid field ahead. A graveyard of rock and ice. A perfect place to hide. He pushed the ship forward, diving into the chaos. The AI warship hesitated for a split second, enough for Alex to gain distance. The drones followed, weaving through the debris, but they weren't built for unpredictable movement. Alex was. He twisted the ship through the asteroids, barely scraping by. The drones weren't so lucky. One clipped a rock, spinning out before shattering on impact. Another wasn't fast enough to react to Alex's sudden dive. It crashed, exploding into a silent burst of fire. But the AI warship wasn't done. It unleashed a swarm of microdrones, small, fast, deadly. Alex's HUD flashed red. The ship couldn't outrun them. His mind raced. Think. Think. He spotted an old mining station, half buried in the asteroid field. Maybe. He cut the engines. The ship drifted, pretending to be another lifeless wreck. The microdrones sped past, scanning for movement. Alex held his breath. One of the drones passed right in front of the cockpit. Too close. Then, a sudden pulse from the mining station. The ancient power core inside was unstable. The energy signature distracted the AI for just a second. Alex saw his chance. He fired the thrusters. The sudden burst sent the ship rocketing forward, straight into the mining station's docking bay. The metal doors barely held, slamming shut behind them. Darkness. Silence. Outside, the AI drones hovered, scanning. They hesitated. Then, they moved on. Alex exhaled sharply. They had survived. For now. The Zyvar woman placed a hand on his shoulder. No words, just silent gratitude. Alex nodded. He wasn't sure how much longer they could keep running. But one thing was certain. This war wasn't over. Alex Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the remaining ammo. 4 magazines, 1 knife, no backup. It wasn't enough, but it would have to be. The old mining station had bought them time, but not safety. The AI warship had figured out where they were. It had surrounded the station, cutting off all escape routes. The only reason it hadn't fired yet was simple. It wanted them alive. For now, the Zyvar woman held her child close, whispering in their alien tongue. The injured father barely moved, his breathing slow. Alex had done what he could for him, but without proper medical help, he wouldn't last long. A metallic clang echoed through the station's corridors. Alex froze. The Zyvar woman's eyes widened. She had heard it too. They were here. Eye enforcers, sleek, humanoid machines designed for one thing: elimination. They had found a way inside. Alex gritted his teeth, gripping his rifle tighter. The station's corridors were tight, filled with old crates and mining equipment. He could use that. Turn the terrain into an advantage. Another sound, closer this time. He pressed his back against the wall, heart hammering. His HUD flickered as it detected movement. 3 enforcers, armed, fast. Alex took a slow breath. No room for hesitation. He peeked around the corner. A red glare met his eyes. The first enforcer lunged. Alex fired. 3 quick shots. Center mass. The bullet sparked against its armor, barely slowing it down. The machine swung an arm, and Alex barely ducked in time. The impact of metal against the wall shook the whole corridor. Too strong. Too fast. Alex rolled back, switching to armor-piercing rounds. He aimed for the head. Bang. The enforcer collapsed. No time to breathe. The second machine charged through the smoke, plasma blade igniting in its arm. Alex dived behind a crate as the blade sliced clean through metal. Sparks flew. He popped up, firing 2 shots. 1 to the leg, 1 to the head. The enforcer jerked, then fell. 1 left. A sudden force slammed into Alex's side. He crashed against the floor, pain exploding through his ribs. The last enforcer had tackled him. It raised its blade. Alex jammed his rifle into the machine's chest and pulled the trigger. Click. Out of ammo. The enforcer's red eyes flickered as it drove the blade down. At the last second, Alex twisted, and the blade stabbed into the floor beside his head. He grabbed his knife and plunged it into the machine's neck joint. Sparks erupted. The enforcer convulsed, its systems failing. Then it went still. Alex gasped for breath, shoving the lifeless metal body off him. Silence. The Zyvar woman stepped forward, clutching her child. She looked at Alex, not with fear, but with something else. Trust. But it wasn't over. A low hum filled the station. Alex turned toward the monitors. The AI warship was powering up its main cannon. It was going to destroy the entire station. Alex clenched his jaw. They had minutes, maybe less. Then, an idea. He sprinted to the control panel. The mining station's old systems were barely functional, but there was one thing still active: the automated defense turrets. Alex slammed the override. Outside, the turrets whirred to life. The AI warship reacted immediately, sending a squad of drones to disable them. But Alex wasn't done yet. He tapped into the station's gravity stabilizers. Most stations had them to prevent asteroid impacts, but Alex had another use for it. He cranked the settings to max. A deep rumble shook the entire structure as a gravitational pulse erupted from the station, slamming into the AI drones, crushing them under their own weight. The warship hesitated. Alex grinned. He turned to the Zyvar woman. Get to the escape pod. Now. She hesitated, but then nodded. She trusted him. As she carried her child and helped the injured father, Alex grabbed the last explosive charge from his belt. 1 shot. 1 chance. The AI warship was still repositioning, adapting to the new gravity field. That was its weakness. Alex sprinted to the launch bay, where an old railgun turret was rusting away. Still functional. He mounted the explosive onto one of the remaining tungsten slugs, a homemade warhead. The AI ship's cannon began to glow. It was about to fire. Alex slammed the launch button. The railgun roared. The slug streaked through space, a single unstoppable projectile. It pierced straight through the AI warship's hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the warship exploded, a silent, beautiful fireball in the endless black. Alex exhaled. They had won. But as he turned back toward the escape pod, he knew one thing. The war was far from over. The stars stretched endlessly in the vast black void as Alex Carter sat in the escape pod, his breath slow, his body aching from wounds and exhaustion. The Zyvar mother held her child close, the father still weak, but alive beside them. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. The pod drifted through space, silent and fragile. Their oxygen was limited. Supplies were almost gone. Alex had won them a victory, but at what cost? A soft beeping sound echoed in the cramped pod. Alex's HUD flickered. A signal. A ship. But was it friend or foe? His grip tightened around his pistol. He wasn't going down without a fight. The Zyvar mother placed a hand on his arm. She wasn't afraid. For the first time, she wasn't trembling. A bright light flooded the pod as the massive silhouette of a ship loomed above them. The hull bore markings, human markings. Alex's shoulders slumped. Reinforcements. The pod shuddered as a docking beam latched onto it, pulling them into the safety of the ship's hangar. The moment the hatch opened, medical personnel rushed in, scanning Alex and the Zyvar family. Carter. A gruff voice. Alex turned. Captain Reynolds. Reynolds' eyes flicked over him, then the aliens. His face darkened. We were told no survivors were left. Alex didn't blink. They are now. A long silence. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. The Zyvar woman held her child tighter. Reynolds sighed. Get them medical care. Now. The tension eased. As medics worked, Alex felt a strange sense of relief. He had defied orders, risked everything, and yet, he had saved them. Maybe, just maybe, it was worth it. Days passed. Alex lay in the infirmary, his wounds healing, his mind still restless. The war wasn't over. Humanity was still fighting the AI. But something had changed. The Zyvar mother visited him, standing beside his bed. She held out something. A small, intricate pendant, glowing softly. A gift. A symbol of gratitude. Alex took it, feeling the weight of it in his palm. She spoke, her voice quiet, broken, but clear. Thank you. The first words of her kind spoken to a human. A spark. A moment that would change everything. News spread. The fleet learned of what Alex had done, of the aliens that were supposed to be dead but weren't. And then, the impossible happened. The Zyvar people responded. A signal, faint but undeniable. Survivors, hidden deep in space, waiting, hoping. Humanity had fought alone for so long, but now they had an ally. And all because one soldier had refused to walk away. The war wasn't over, but for the first time in years, there was hope. A legacy built on a single act of compassion. And that Alex knew was worth fighting for.